Toy Spot, we're going to be having a look at the legendary comic book heroes Witchblade. This is the very last review I've done in the Pitt series here. And I figured I'd leave the head, torso, upper half bust of Pitt for the very last. And I'd also leave Witchblade for the last. There's a reason for it, and I'll get into that when I open the figure up. But if we have a look at the packaging here first, as you can see, collect all 6 figures to build your own Pitt. And as mentioned, she comes with the head and upper torso of Pitt. Rather, I don't know why I said rather, but quite a large bust as well. And I'm so looking forward to getting this guy put together. But there we have Witchblade. On the back of the packaging, there's a bit of a read-up here for Witchblade. I'll read it for you guys again, don't worry. New York City police detective Sarah Pazzini is the reluctant bearer of the Witchblade, an ancient and mysterious mystical gauntlet that has bonded itself to her. Only one woman in a generation is chosen to bear the enigmatic weapon, but at great cost. Sarah must resist the gauntlet's all-consuming thirst for battle, all the while solving the city's strangest crimes, many of which unveritably seem to lead back to the Witchblade. I didn't follow Witchblade all that much. I read a handful of issues back in the 90s when all these comics were popping up. As any comic book viewer, I've got a little bit of hair there, as any comic book collector will tell you, back in the 90s there was this huge boom that happened, and you got all these comics that really came up to the forefront. Prior to that, it was really just DC and Marvel. Then Image came to town. Image, big boom in the comic industry, and then from there we got characters like Spawn and Wildcats. Then we got some of the more obscure characters such as Madman. And Savage Dragon popped up as well. Eric Larson's Savage Dragon, and then Top Cow came out. Malibu came out. Malibu, I think, was really the victim of the 90s boom in comics. It had some interesting characters like Ultraman and stuff like that. They made a cartoon, which I thought was terrible, of Malibu characters. Needless to say, I think there's only a few comics that survived, I think, the 90s boom in comics. And Witchblade was one of them, but I really didn't follow Witchblade all that much. Again, I just read some issues back in the 90s, but I did want to get the character. I think the character the figure looked pretty cool when I saw her, and I wanted to definitely pick her up. But I'll touch more on that when I get this figure opened up. So what I'll do is I'll open Witchblade up, at least the figure, and we will get a closer look at Witchblade. See you guys. As I mentioned during the packaging aspect of the review, Witchblade was really part of that huge boom in the 90s comics, or during the 90s period. As a result, I think a lot of people jumped on comics thinking it was, seeing the potential in it. There was a lot of comic series coming out to television. One of them was Nightman, which I believe was from the Malibu series of comics, and Witchblade also was another TV series. Nightman was just terrible. I might have even stomached through 2 or 3 episodes of it. Terrible TV series, though. It was live action. The other live action show that I think fared a little bit better, if I'm not mistaken, it was on like HBO, and that was Witchblade. Granted, the television series I don't think really translated well from the comics, and if you watched my top 10 Van Damme movies, one of the things I stated during the Hard Target DVD was that I thought Yancy Butler, she's a terrible actress. God bless her. I'm sorry, Yancy, I know you watch my videos, but she doesn't really watch my videos, but I don't like her as an actress. And I don't think she really helped Witchblade the series much at all. Not that series really needed help, because somehow it survived 3 seasons. It was like 2 or 3 seasons, but I just could not get into it. Needless to say, I'm getting off topic here. If we have a look at the figure, now one thing I mentioned during the packaging that I wanted to comment on during the figure, one of the reasons why as well I left her to the last, was that if I just show you, and I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up just right, and can you see the face on the Witchblade figure there? That was the same conceptual figure that we saw in Toy Fair for the Witchblade figure, and I thought based on the sculpt on the head and everything else that she was a really, really nice looking figure. I read Witchblade enough to know what the character was about that I thought, oh, you know, I'll pick it up. Well, if you look at the face on her versus the face on this figure, it's not as good though, is it? The eyes, it looks like she's got cat eyes. It's definitely a case where you pick up a figure thinking it's going to look one way, and then when you get the figure, you're really disappointed. I think that's what I'm kind of experiencing with the Witchblade. Of all the characters from the Legendary comic book series of figures, with the Pitt series at least, I was most excited to get the Judge Dredd and the Witchblade. And now that I've opened her up, and actually now that I got her in the mail, I really was disappointed with how the figure looks, at least the face. I also don't like the hair, how this hair jets out like this. The problem with it too is the way it's sculpted. In theory, you would be able to see her ear, and you'll notice there is no ear. Witchblade is without an ear. And I don't even know if there's an ear here. It kind of looks like if she had an ear it would be squished, but I'm really disappointed with the figure. The body isn't too bad. The sculpt is nice. It's just that the hair and the face, I think, is really what is disappointing about the figure. In the way of articulation, she's got still movement in her head, although it can't move too much just because of the shoulder area and because of the sculpt on the hair. She has articulation in the shoulders, the arms, in the hand. She has no articulation in the forearm. She has articulation in the torso, but it doesn't look like it moves all that much. She has articulation in the waist, in the leg, in the knee, 2 points actually in the knee, in the calf area, as well as in the foot and in the toe. But again, as I pointed out, I think it's the face that really spoils the figure for me. I mean, had she had this face, I think it would have looked really nice, but I don't say it's the figure I hate the most of the series. I still think I take this figure over the Savage Dragon. I'm just really not a fan of the Savage Dragon, but as you'll see in the background here, she comes with a very, very large bust of Pitt. Just absolutely huge. And now that this is the 5th piece, or the 6th piece of Pitt, I'm going to put him together and I'll do a review of him right after I finish her. But overall, it's not a bad figure. I just wish the face was a little nicer on it. Definitely a weaker figure. But there you have a toy spot on the Legendary Comic Book Heroes Witchblade. And with that, I'll see you guys at the next spot. Later.